The tension of global superpowers inevitably led to a nuclear war, known as the Great War, with America being transformed into a wasteland, and civilization struggling to rebuild. Fallout New Vegas focuses around the remains of what once was Las Vegas, the Mojave Desert, with three powers vying for control: the New California Republic, the dictatorship of Caesar's Legion, being led by Caesar, and powerful businessman Mr. House, along with his army of robotic Securitrons. This power struggle is greatly influenced by the protagonist, the Courier, who delivered packages and messages in a warrior-like fashion. That was until the Courier was robbed of a valuable package, the Platinum Chip, and shot in the head. The Courier miraculously awakens, being saved by the Securitron Victor and Doc Mitchell. They're thrust into the fight for the control of New Vegas, and they must choose their side based upon the story painted for them and the evidence placed in front of them. But this information is often vague, and not always what it seems, which leaves many discussions and debates on what true events really happened, even a decade after the game's release, with many creating theories and conspiracies as to what occurred. An iceberg chart is a way to display these theories and conspiracies, with it ordered so the more popular and shallow theories appear at the top of the iceberg, and the deeper down the chart you travel, the more peculiar and perplexing the conspiracies become. We'll be looking at a number of Fallout New Vegas icebergs in this video, taking the most juicy topics from icebergs created by JJ's Tricks and Drunken Legionnaire. But because Fallout icebergs have been covered often before, I've also obtained theories that haven't appeared in a Fallout iceberg yet. So hopefully if this is your 16th Fallout iceberg you've watched, there'll still be some exciting and new information. So let's get our jumpsuit on and brave the conditions of the Mojave Desert to discover the mysteries of the Fallout New Vegas iceberg. Before we fully venture out into the wasteland, what do we, the Courier, know about ourselves? Well, not too much about the Courier is revealed, which covers their past in an aura of mystery. Some, like Sunshine Blind, believe that the Courier is actually the Lone Wanderer, the protagonist from Fallout 3. Fallout New Vegas is set only 4 years after the events in Fallout 3, which happened in 2277. The common thinking of this theory is that the Lone Wanderer wanted to detach themselves from their old life, the narrative of Fallout 3, and travel across the country to Nevada, becoming a Courier. While fantastical, this theory doesn't really slot into the timeline correctly. Part of the Courier's past is revealed, most prominently in the Lonesome Road DLC, where it's detailed that they used to deliver to the Divide. All of these events make the 4-year distance between Fallout 3 and New Vegas for the same protagonist close to impossible. And we'll talk about the Courier's Lonesome Road past further down in the iceberg, but I think it's much more likely, as CryptCat mentions, that the Courier is a descendant of the Vault Dweller and the Chosen One. The Vault Dweller was originally from Vault 13, and the Courier Stash add-on provides the Courier with a Vault 13 canteen, with potentially this referencing a connection between the Courier and Vault 13. Every 5 minutes, the Courier takes an annoying sip from this trusty Vault 13 canteen. This sip not only lowers dehydration in hardcore mode, but also restores 15 health points. And it's an infinite source of water, which raises the murmured conspiracy that whatever is in the Vault 13 canteen, it isn't water. Not much is really spoken about the Vault 13 canteen at all, and it seems to be a very annoying item with such a silent past. But perhaps this mystery is a part of the enigma of the canteen. As generations pass, Vault 13 turned into a myth, becoming known as the Vault of the Holy 13. Hey, you're talking about my ancestor and the people who founded my village. They all came from the Vault of the Holy 13. Perhaps this canteen also contains inside this same level of mythos, being forever flowing and ever healing. One of the most mysterious individuals throughout the Fallout universe is the Mysterious Stranger. A peculiar yet deadly individual, the Mysterious Stranger randomly appears to aid the protagonist in battle. And not much is known about this saviour. The Mysterious Stranger also appears in New Vegas, saving the Courier yet again. But what's more interesting is another individual in New Vegas, the Lone Wanderer. Punk Smurf saw some similarities between these two individuals, and was one of the first to believe that the Lonesome Drifter is the Mysterious Stranger's son. The Lonesome Drifter travels the wastelands, singing and playing his guitar. It can be found at the El Dorado Gas and Service. He explains his past and how his father left him.
Long time ago now, I never even knew him. Ma always said he was a mysterious fella, always traveling on in secret.
Upon offering the Lonesome Drifter a job, he can compensate you.
I suppose it's only right you get a little something for your troubles. Here, my daddy left me this gun. Guess I don't need it no more.
This weapon is the .44 Magnum revolver, also known as the Mysterious Magnum, which plays the same theme song as the Mysterious Stranger when it's drawn and holstered. So it's very strong hints that the Mysterious Stranger is a Lonesome Drifter's father. And perhaps stronger still, New Vegas director and lead designer Josh Sawyer stated that they really wish they had the time to code in that the Mysterious Stranger would kill the Courier if they tried to take out the Lonesome Drifter. But not everyone in the Mojave Desert is mysterious. A modified Securitron, Yes Man is incapable of declining any order or withholding any information he has, which Benny was utilising to help usurp Mr. House and gain control of New Vegas. When the Courier encounters Yes Man, they divulge all of Benny's plans and then offer their service to the Courier, which the Courier can use to expel both the Legion and the NCR. And through this ending, Yes Man makes a discovery.
I found some code snippets in one of Mr. House's databanks that will let me, reprogram my personality to be a little more assertive, basically.
Many, like Hannah Duck, interpreted this as Yes Man becoming more independent, and could end up turning against the Courier. We should not trust Yes Man. Yes Man has two cut faces that can be found in the game files, which express a more subdued and even angry face. Perhaps these are hints at a more sinister Yes Man, lurking in the background, biding their time, waiting to be unlocked through upgrades. Mega Manoi 17 believed that these faces were going to be used post-endgame to show Yes Man's assertive personality. But Josh Sawyer yet again refutes this theory, stating that the assertive remark just meant that Yes Man would become more loyal to the Courier, and wasn't able to be used for nefarious purposes. A relatively wholesome outcome compared to the theory of a sinister Yes Man, and it seems that's why Yes Man's other two faces ended up being removed from the game, so that Yes Man could achieve his cheery and agreeable personality. Now it's time for us to research them more, and enter the big empty layer of the iceberg. In a world where resources are becoming increasingly rare, toolboxes are a blessed relief. A container to store items, these toolboxes are also an invitation for others to take claim to the prizes stored within. The Greasy Toolbox is a variant of toolbox found in Old World Blues, containing a variety of snacks. The X-13 Research Facility Terminal details Technician Slough. Working at the Big Mountain Research and Development Centre before the Great War, Slough was a part of the X-13 Research Facility, working on tools and weapons such as the sonic emitter. But Slough's work quality began to diminish, coinciding with an increase in weight. Cameras were being smudged, which resulted in Dr. Callis threatening to ban all snacks in the facility if another was smudged. So Slough would keep stashes of snacks, like Fancy Lads, around the facility, stowing them in vents and toolboxes, only for them to be stolen by his colleagues, such as Assistant Mendoza. These are the toolboxes that became known as the Greasy Toolboxes. And many of these can be found scattered around the X-13 Research Facility. However, many more can be found throughout the map of the Old World Blues, the Big MT. The boxes outside of the facility can also be found next to weapons, stim packs and other means of survival. P90 Roosh B believes that Slough survived both the events of the Great War and the failed experiments, which vaporised the mountain of the Big Mountain Research and Development Centre, turning it into a crater. From the Big MT to the Big Empty. Slough was gunning down the hostile experiments of the Big MT, being fueled on by his snacks. But unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. Near the Cazador testing lab, one greasy toolbox can be found at the end of a sewage pipe, along with a heap of ammunition. Mouse 200 surmises that Slough made his last stand on this pipe, before he was overcome by the terrors of the MT. It's amazing something as fleeting as a toolbox could contain a story behind it. Another instance of this could be found from a jumpsuit that didn't even make it into the final cut of the game. Found hidden away in the game files is the jumpsuit of Vault 24. Vault jumpsuits were worn by the inhabitant of the vaults. Being marketed as fashionable and comfortable, these jumpsuits were also made to withstand rugged use. Even come the time of New Vegas, the jumpsuits remained popular. Sarah Weintraub is the manager of the Vaults Turned Hotel and gift shop of Vault 21. One of her most popular items is the jumpsuit.
All the popular stuff has been sold, especially the vault suits. I need to find more because people buy them like hotcakes.
These jumpsuits can be found outside of Vault 21, more commonly inside their own vault. Vault 3, Vault 11, Vault 19, 22 and 34. But there's no sign of the Vault 24 jumpsuits, nor Vault 24 for that matter. So what really happened to Vault 24? The more pondered this same question and asked Josh Sawyer. I think we may have generated a few additional vault suits from vaults that were never intended to be in the game, but I can't remember why. Maybe as part of a collection quest for Sarah Weintraub. Sawyer answered this question 9 years after the release of New Vegas, so his recollection could be hazy. But what's interesting is that from potentially multiple unused vault jumpsuits, only one seemed to make it into the game files. And if we were to spawn this Vault 24 jumpsuit, we're unable to sell it to Sarah. So is there something special about Vault 24? Perhaps something that Sawyer forgot about or was not aware of? Wildman1102 theorises that Vault 24 actually managed to make its way into New Vegas, being known as the Securitron Vault. Securitrons are mass-produced security robots, with most of the Securitrons being controlled by Mr. House.
Our titanium alloy housing does a good job of protecting our delicate electronic insides from small arms fire and shrapnel.
Robert House founded one of the most profitable corporations in the world, Robco Industries.
By the time I was 30 years old, I was a billionaire 30 times over. I founded and ran a vast economic empire.
However, due to the Great War, Robert's empire was greatly diminished. Mr. House enhanced his body and preserved himself by connecting himself to a hibernation chamber with a vast network. Come the event of New Vegas, Mr. House had been rebuilding his empire, using his Securitrons in order to enact his rule. The Securitron Vault houses an army of these Securitrons, planned by Mr. House to be enhanced using the Platinum chip, and releasing them into the world, condemning humanity. The Securitron Vault has many large rooms, overlooking the massive Securitrons, but it also contains a lot of technology, doors, rooms and corridors that resemble many of the vaults of the Mojave Desert. But this Securitron Vault is different from the other vaults. There's no areas like the living quarters. Wildman1102 supposes that Mr. House originally purchased this vault, Vault 24, and gutted the unneeded rooms, making it a home for his massive robotic army. If the Vault 24 jumpsuit remaining in the game files holds any significance, then it could be a fleeting suggestion that Vault 24 was meant to be in the game, and perhaps morphed into what the Securitron Vault became. Mr. House utilises this vault in order to enact his vision of taking control of New Vegas.
With all that money pouring in? Give me 20 years and I'll reignite the high technology development sectors. 50 years and I'll have people in orbit. 100 years and my colony ships will be heading for the stars to search for planets unpolluted by the wrath and folly of a bygone generation.
Mr. House's goal could be to uplift human civilization to travel to space and populate, creating colonies outside of Earth. Many, like KBZeng123, believe that the Outer Worlds could be a depiction of this House-controlled world. The Fallout universe has evolved over its multiple decades of existence, being worked on by multiple development studios. Fallout's concept and general post-apocalyptic setting was formulated by Interplay's Wasteland way back in 1988, and they later developed Fallout close to a decade later. Its division, later known as Black Isle Studios, developed Fallout 2, but the development of the second installment was shaky, with artist and designer Jason Anderson stating that there were disagreements with Interplay as to how the team should have been structured. Due to the massive success of Fallout, Interplay was growing massively, with lead artist Leonard Boyarsky relating the company's expansion to the downturn of the culture. Midway through development of Fallout 2, these employees, along with producer and lead programmer Tim Kaine, left Interplay.
Found out decisions are being made on Fallout 2 that not only I don't like and don't agree with, but I wasn't even a part of.
They formed Troika Games. As the years rolled by, Interplay made some poor strategic choices, like focusing their attention on console games, which they never had great success in, and they cancelled multiple projects. This led to deep financial issues, with Interplay selling assets like the development studio Shiny Entertainment, and then the licensing rights of 3 Fallout games to Bethesda by 2004. But a few years later, the creditors came knocking on Interplay's door again, asking for more money, with Interplay having to sell the complete Fallout property to Bethesda. Troika Games had attempted to obtain these Fallout rights, but they were outbid. So Bethesda would go on to develop and publish many Fallout games, but during their development of Skyrim, they didn't actually work on the Fallout game New Vegas. They licensed New Vegas to a relatively new studio, Obsidian Entertainment. By this time, Troika Games had closed its doors, also due to financial troubles, and Tim Kaine had moved along to Obsidian Entertainment. Obsidian became home to many Black Isle Studio employees who worked on the original Fallout games, and you can see this through the love, care and passion that Obsidian had when working on New Vegas. Fast forward to 2016, and Leonard Boyarsky had also joined Obsidian Entertainment, working on a new project with Tim Kaine. With this new project, they were given Fallout and Firefly as game inspirations, which inspired them to create the Outer Worlds. So the Outer Worlds could very much be the spiritual successor of New Vegas. In 2004, Boyarsky stated that he was extremely disappointed that we did not get the chance to make the next Fallout game. This has nothing to do with Bethesda, it's just that we've always felt that Fallout was ours, and it was just a technicality that Interplay happened to own it. It sort of felt as if our child had been sold to the highest bidder, and we had to just sit by and watch. Even though many of the team got to work on New Vegas, they could still have felt very attached to the story, and the Outer Worlds could be their way of expressing it. And this kind of feeling could even be subtly mentioned in the Outer Worlds. Vile Plays discovered a correspondence in the terminal in Edgewater, discussing Earth, which had gone dark, offline to other colonies in space. Clement speculates that Earth's power struggle was greatly influenced by a Great War, with the costs severely weakening many corporations. Now, not much more is mentioned of this Great War, and it seems to be left up to the player to determine whether this Great War is the same one that's mentioned in Fallout. And while these two games are not likely to be linked originally, due to them being made by different developers, well now, both Bethesda and Obsidian are owned by Microsoft, so a combining of this universe could be possible, but I think that would only just anger an audience that is already oversaturated with combined universes. The story of Mr. House could have influenced both the developers and inhabitants of the Outer World, resonating throughout time. But there's another story that could have encouraged many closer to home in the Mojave Desert. And to discover that, let's traverse the devastated land of the Divide. Fool's Requiem believes that the Courier is more than just the protagonist of New Vegas. Being a fable, a folk hero, respected throughout the Mojave Desert. For some reason, many people trust the Courier, like Mr. House, who allows him into the fortress of Lucky 38. The Kaisar and the New Californian Republic also solely rely and trust the Courier. But why? Well, maybe the Courier is more than just a brain-damaged messenger. This folklore is greatly strengthened by the Lonesome Road expansion, which explains the story of the long-forgotten towns of Hopeville and Ashton, located in a region of the Divide. Being the military's experimental playground, these towns were largely abandoned after the Great War, but a small, resilient community remained. This community began to flourish solely through the deliveries of one courier.
The road you made with your tracks again and again. You were the only one willing to make the journey to and from here. A hard road. Kept the land before the Divide alive through seasons, storms. Can't have been just a job. Was something more to you. Don't feel for a place that hard unless it's home.
Ulysses, also a courier, took a likening to the Divide, seeing it as a potential home for him. But before he would enact his vision, a mysterious package was delivered. This package activated all of the dormant warheads beneath Hopeville and Ashton, devastating the Divide, and nearly killing Ulysses. Ulysses would wander the wasteland for years, ruining the courier's destruction of his land, seeking his revenge. This revenge culminates in the Lonesome Road, with the courier and Ulysses fighting at the Divide.
The battle between the two couriers, beneath the torn skies and the old world flag, each bearing a message for the other.
But all of this information is delivered to us through Ulysses, and the courier doesn't seem to have any recollection of this past. Like Zymural Chemist, we could attribute this to some sort of memory loss by the courier. They did get shot in the head after all. But lead designer Josh Sawyer said in an Ask Me Anything that the courier is not an amnesiac. Questions about the MCR, Legion, local going-ons, etc. are present so the player does not stumble around without a clue. We can't assume any given player is familiar with these factions. So while it could be a bit of janky familiarity with the Divide narrative, it does seem strange that the courier has visibly no recollection of the Divide. Zymural Chemist does have another theory for why the courier doesn't remember the Divide, and it's due to actually never having been there in the first place. We only know through Ulysses that the courier had a hand in the destruction of the Divide. But what happens if it was a different courier? Mistaken identity, with its folktale being pinned to the courier through the mind of Ulysses. The ending of The Lonesome Road states that,
As for the courier, he turned his back on his home for the second time and made his way back, navigating the treachery of the Divide.
But yet again, this message is narrated by Ulysses, perhaps containing his figmented narrative, continuing the courier folklore. But Joe Peak has another theory, a well-trodden trope, that perhaps all of these events are in the courier's mind, being in a coma. The courier is initially shot in the head by Benny, waking up later to find that they've been saved by Dr. Mitchell. Upon recovering, the courier goes on to single-handedly navigate the fate of Mojave Wasteland. This sounds almost too good to be true. So what happens if it is? What happens if the courier didn't manage to leave Doc Mitchell's house, concocting the entire story in their mind? Joe Peak proposes that Doc Mitchell is more sinister than depicted, being transfixed by the courier, perhaps looking like his wife, and dresses the courier in his wife's old vault suit, which we do see in New Vegas if the courier is chosen as female. A combination of Doc's perversive fixation and the brain damage inflicted upon the courier leads to this morph story of the terrifying reality of Fallout, and the heroic actions the courier takes to save their realm. A nice fun theory that Joe Peak themselves doesn't actually believe is true, but it's an interesting explanation for how the courier could miraculously survive without losing any of their memories. The game theorists made a video looking into whether it was possible for the courier to survive being shot in the head, and while the first shot from a Maria would have most likely just knocked the courier unconscious, the second shot, on a still target, would have erased the courier from existence. So if we were to believe the courier would have had to have been in a coma, they probably would have died anyway. It's a bit of a crazy theory, maybe something that No Bark Noonan would have cooked up. No Bark Noonan wanders the towns of Novak, and seems to be the village idiot, watching over the comings and goings of this town, while ranting about many conspiracies.
I don't trust a man that doesn't have something strange going on about him, because it means he's hiding it from you.
It seems that Nobark's age has gotten the better of him, but in actuality, his condition is due to multiple poisonous rad scorpion stings.
Them quack doctors can say what they want about all the rad scorpion stings that done pierced my skull, and I know what I seen.
Rad scorpions can be found throughout the Fallout games, being extremely common in both Fallout 2 and New Vegas. New Vegas is set in 2281, 40 years after the events of Fallout 2. Fallout 2 details the Chosen One, the grandchild of Fallout's protagonist, the Vault Dweller of Vault 13, freeing their village of Arroyo while severely denting the Enclave's plans for world domination. One of the most popular theories in New Vegas, which I can date all the way back to 2011 through Lament Earache, is that Nobark could be this same Chosen One. The Fallout Bible says that the Chosen One is born on the 23rd of March 2221, and by the time of Fallout New Vegas, the Chosen One would be 60 years old, and Nobark could definitely pass for a 60-year-old. Scattered around Novak are clues that could point to a Fallout 2 origin. Just south of Novak is the wrecked Highwayman. What remains poking out of a sinkhole is the trunk of a Highwayman, the cars used by the Chosen One to travel. When discovered, the Fallout 2 truck Gold Slouch is played, while writer Chris Avalon states that only the trunk was visible, being a reference to a bug in Fallout 2, where the trunk of the Highwayman would go invisible. So is this a car from Fallout 2, perhaps driven by the Chosen One, who crashes, and the Chosen One seeks shelter in the nearby town of Novak? Also in Novak, in Dino Bite's gift shop, is that gun, which looks uncannily similar to the 223 used in Fallout 2. Fallout Ambient speculates that Nobark could have pawned his gun in order to obtain food or supplies, especially after he crashed his car so far from his previous home of Arroyo. But that gun uses 5.56 ammo, whereas the 223 pistols from Fallout 2 use 223 ammo, so the weapon might not necessarily be the same gun. Josh Sawyer does mention that that gun uses 5.56 because they don't have 223 as a primary ammo type, and also mentioned that it was called that gun due to many players often calling it that gun in Fallout and Fallout 2. The 223 pistol was a unique weapon in the original Fallout, but come Fallout 2, it can be purchased from many stores and used by other people in Northern California, so there's no confirming that this gun is indeed the Chosen One's. But that's not where their hints end for Nobark's past. Nobark says,
I know a spell that'll make you show your true form. Cave rat taught it to me.
Klamath, a town not far from Arroyo, was plagued by rats. Underneath the city are intertwined caves, which have been taken over by rats, commanded by King Rat. Could this be the rat that taught Nobark some spells? Well, in Fallout 2, the King Rat is always hostile, only wanting to fight the chosen undead, not teach them anything. And Ryo Kaiba raises a good point. In one of his rants, Nobark does say,
I come face to face with the Chupacabra himself one night, whilst I was investigating whether this gecko was hiding his treasure from me. Walked right past me having an argument with somebody. But I only saw one Chupacabra, so I guess the other fella had to be invisible too, only more invisible than the other one.
A Chupacabra is a reptile-like folktale creature that attacks and drinks the blood of livestock. But what Nobark thought was his legendary animal actually turned out to be a Night King, which the Chosen One encountered many times. Ryo Kaiba reasons that the Chosen One would have been able to identify a Night King and not mistake them for a legend. So Nobark may not in fact be the Chosen One. Others, like Johnny Steele, think that Nobark is the sole survivor from Vault 11. Vault 11 was one of the most cruel vaults in the Mojave Wasteland. Designed as a social experiment, the vault required a sacrifice of one of their inhabitants each year, or else everyone in the vault would die. This led to countless mutinies, murders, and betrayal, with the inhabitants being reduced to outright war. That was until there were only 5 inhabitants remaining, when they decided that dying together by the machine was better than sacrificing yet another of the vault dwellers. However, instead of the vault killing them for their disobedience, it commended them.
Congratulations, citizens of Vault 11. You have made the decision not to sacrifice one of your own. You can walk with your head held high, knowing that your commitment to human life is a shining example to us all. And to make that feeling of pride even sweeter, I have some exciting news. Despite what you were led to believe, the population of Vault 11 is not going to be exterminated for its disobedience. Instead, the mechanism to open the main vault door has now been enabled, and you can come and go at your leisure.
The remaining survivors were horrified and disgusted by their retrospectively meaningless sacrifices, and thought it best to end their lives as punishment.
Are we really gonna do this? It's open, we could just leave.
I couldn't, not after that.
We don't deserve to leave. A shining example. That's what it called us. But we did what we were supposed to. Not by a long shot. Anybody would have done what we did.
You ask me? That's exactly the problem. Now let's get on with this.
I'll go first. Wait. People should know what happened. They could learn from it.
The Vault 11 holotape described that only 4 corpses can be found, laying at the entrance of this vault. It's thought that one of the 5 survivors didn't end their life, leaving the vaults to share their mistakes. However, the Courier doesn't learn the story of this vault until they go and explore what's within. So did the survivor live long enough to spread their failures? Or maybe they had second thoughts on sharing their suffering? Johnny Steele thinks this last survivor of Vault 11 went crazy through the immense toil of Vault 11's failures, and wandered around until he found the town of Novak, sharing what he knows, which was warped into countless conspiracies, having no bark. The Crystal Cow provided some more links between Vault 11 and Nobark, with both Nobark's shack and the Overseer's office in Vault 11 containing shotgun traps, and Nobark has a Vault-Tec poster. However, many like Revelations 216 and Subjugator 001 argue that Nobark cannot be the Vault 11 survivor. A unique room in Vault 11 is a sacrificial chamber, where those nominated to be sacrificed would go for their final minutes of life. When the Courier examines the chamber, there are 16 skeletons, and because a sacrifice was required once a year, it makes sense that the experiment only lasted 17 years. With the vaults being sealed during the Great War in 2077, this would mean that Vault 11 would have been opened in 2095, which means that the survivor would surely not have made it until the day of Fallout New Vegas in 2281, unassisted like Nobark. But Mountain Dew 120 points us to a terminal entry containing a prepared speech by the Ombudsman for Vault 11. Vault 11 had been electing their overseers, but had been suffering through unfettered corruption, which Olsen had said had been going on for what felt like decades by now. This would imply that the span of Vault 11 experiment would have stretched for much longer than 17 years, when even the corruption phase of the Vault 11 experiments could have lasted that long. Even still, the survivor of Vault 11 being Nobark is highly unlikely. Josh Sawyer mentioned that he thinks the survivor of Vault 11 was intentionally left open, while in the game files an NPC called the Vault 11 survivor can be found. So it's most likely this character was cut late from the game, left to be ambiguous. Let's make sure our radiation suits are on, as we're about to enter the final layer of this iceberg, the most radiated zone in New Vegas, the Dry Wells. Throughout the Mojave Wasteland, the threat of being murdered and robbed is ever present. Many camps of raiders are sprinkled throughout, and none were as great or as notorious as the Great Khans. But come the event of New Vegas, the tribe is only a mere shadow of its once ominous former self. They became outmuscled by Mr. House incentivized tribes, and shifted their raids to the new Californian Republic. However, one such raid led to the abduction and killing of 4 NCR soldiers, which led to a vicious retaliation by the NCR. The NCR organised an attack on the Great Khan settlement of Bitter Springs.
The major in charge at the time made a bad call. He thought Bitter Springs was full of Great Khan raiders, so we surrounded the place.
It was all wrong, though. Women, kids, elderly, wounded started coming through too. We radioed to confirm our orders, but command didn't get what we were seeing. They told us to shoot till we were out of ammo, so that's what we did.
Officially, it's stated that through miscommunication, the National Californian Republic massacred countless women and children. But from the first-hand accounts that we hear, it seems that, although possible, it would be quite difficult to misinterpret such simple communication. Some, like Mr. Shagnificent, believes that the Bitter Springs massacre was a purposeful extermination of the Great Tribe, with there being no real miscommunication at all. But deeper conspirators, like Death Fairy, believe that the Legion is responsible for the Bitter Springs massacre. One theory is that someone, perhaps the leader of the Legion, infiltrated the communication channels and fed contradictory information in order to confuse the command and result in the NCR firing upon civilians. This outrageous war crime crippled NCR's reputation, which benefited the Legion greatly, and even drove the Khans to be consumed with the thought of joining the Legion. The Legion are no strangers to some miscommunication combined with some espionage. Captain in the NCR army, Ronald Curtis is a plant for the Legion, spying on and sabotaging the NCR.
Christ, keep it down. You want to blow the whole thing? We've worked years for this.
So maybe Curtis, or someone at a similar vein, helped orchestrate this massacre. Curtis worked hard to make captain in the NCR.
Took me 3.5 years just to make captain. Usually takes 4, but I made sure there was an early vacancy.
Making sure there was some vacancy seems to imply that Curtis murdered a captain in order to take his position, but maybe that wasn't the only way. Darthree explained some of the politics that were a result of the massacre.
Yeah, I was there. I was Captain Darthree then. That whole situation was a mess and could easily have been avoided with good intel. The Major froze up at the news, and we couldn't get another word out of him. I took over and salvaged the situation as best I could. For my effort, I was promoted to Major. Not quite the way I'd have wanted it.
The Bitter Springs massacre seemed to cost a Major a job in the NCR, with Darthree being promoted away from Captain. Maybe the original Major was demoted down to Captain, or just maybe, this Captain vacancy was filled by none other than Curtis, with the Legion plotting the Bitter Springs massacre to fracture the NCR hierarchy. Second in command of the Legion, the Monster of the East, Legate Linnaeus, is fabled for his devotion to Caesar and for his ability to sense weakness in any army. He struck fear through the Legion and the Legion's foes.
The Legate Linnaeus is renowned as a brutal man, not a subtle tactician.
Linnaeus carries all the terrors of the East with him. He's the myth, the weapon the Legion needs.
Linnaeus almost seems weaponized to a point where it's hard to determine which stories are fact and which stories are fiction. Well, perhaps his leader, Kaiser, would know more about the truth behind this menacing leader.
Once, he was the greatest warrior of the Hydebarks, a tribe of the Arizona. Maniacal in battle. Sometimes he'd ambush Legion patrols by himself. He killed 15 before they brought him down. He didn't die, obviously. I had him tended to. He was maimed, most of his face torn off. It was days before he regained consciousness. When he did, I went to his bedside and showed him the helmet I'd had forged to cover his face. I said he could have it if he'd fight for me.
Using console commands, we can glimpse under Linnaeus' mask to see a fully intact face, with a luscious beard, and bearing no signs of any maiming. This could be a game limitation, or perhaps this story by Kaiser is not entirely true. Another higher-ranking member of the Legion army, Lucius, details what he knows about the Legate.
He's the best warrior in the Legion. A full legionary by the time he was 12. He's never lost a battle.
Yet again, this story doesn't entirely add up, contradicting Kaiser's story of joining the Legion much later in life. It seems like there are many myths surrounding Linnaeus, which seems to be what Ulysses is hinting towards, with Kaiser concocting this mysterious aura to strike fear and order into many. Colonel Ewan proposed that Linnaeus might actually be multiple people, and if one person dies, another steps up to the mantle of Linnaeus, taking their place. The First Persian Empire spanned from Southeast Europe to Egypt and all the way to Central Asia, being the largest empire ever come that time in history, encompassing 5.5 million square kilometres. The most elite of this army were gathered into a unit known as the Persian Immortals. Becoming arguably one of the most famous forces in the entire world, the historical records for the Immortals are fragmented, with Greek historian Herodotus detailing them. Herodotus mentioned that this corps was known as the Immortals because it was invariably kept up to strength. If a man was killed or fell sick, the vacancy he left was at once filled, so that the total strength of the corps was never less, and never more than 10,000. This would make the force seem inexhaustible, causing despair and fear into Persia's rivals. We can never know this for sure, as no other source mentioned the Immortals other than Herodotus. And they could have been confused by another force that had the name Anusia, instead of the similarly worded Anoisa. And I think that this is a perfect analogy for Linnaeus. Linnaeus could have indeed been multiple people, appearing immortal and almighty, striking fear into many. But the true motive of Linnaeus is through the many myths and deliberate misinformation being spread around in order to cement a legend. Like Tagazil puts it, if there is only one origin story for Linnaeus, he can readily be accepted as a man. But if there are multiple, conflicting origin stories, the seeds of a legend has been sowed, and perhaps immortalised. Ultimately, I think beneath all of this mystery, Linnaeus is still one person. Being incredibly tall, the tallest NPC in the game, Linnaeus would be hard to find replacements for. And for his face, well, Obsidian never intended us to see his face, so perhaps it was never planned to be implemented, or it had to be cut from the game due to time constraints. And Linnaeus might not be the only Legion member turned into a title. Malpace Legate was one of the co-founders of Legion, terrorizing tribes for decades. However, he became overconfident, and upon the Legion's attack against the New California Republic at the Hoover Dam, Malpace and his legionnaires were lulled into a trap, with the Legion becoming destroyed. Returning to Kaiser with a loss on his hands, Kaiser ordered that Malpace be burned alive, as failure was never an option. Malpace Legate was stripped to his name, Joshua Graham, set on fire, and thrown down to the Grand Canyon. But somehow, Graham survived the descent, waking up burnt and broken, yet alive. Stories of this burnt man made their way back to the Legion, with Kaisers forbidding all from speaking Graham's name, which only stoked the flames of the myth that was the burnt man. But even from what we know, Joshua Graham's story seems quite fanatical. He states that,
"I survived because the fire inside burned brighter than the fire around me. I fell down into that dark chasm. The flame burned on and on."
But willpower only gets you so far, and Captain Superdog believes that the Burning Man is in fact a title, also being passed down to those worthy. The National Park Service says that the depth of the Grand Canyon is on average 1.6 kilometers or a mile deep, which is far too deep for someone to survive a fall, not to mention that he was also ablaze during this fall. The one we can see as Joshua Graham also pronounces Kaiser's name differently to how others in the Mojave Desert do. Most use the pronunciation of Kaiser, which even someone as against the Legion as Ulysses pronounces him as.
None belong to Kaiser, not in this place.
While Joshua Graham pronounces his ex-leader's name differently.
I want to have my revenge. Against him. Against Caesar.
Captain Superdog believes that this mispronunciation is evidence that this burned man is no longer the same one that knew Kaiser, knew how to pronounce his name, and was burned for his failures. Rather, one inspired by the original burned man, taking up the mantle of the newly freed Joshua Graham, continuing to protect the dead horses, deepening the burned man's legacy. Others, like Noog Leader, believe that the burned man is indeed still the original Joshua Graham, and perhaps when he fell, he landed near a source of radiation, becoming a ghoul. Joshua's bandages aren't really to cover up his burns, but in fact, the marks of him being a ghoul. So why would he pronounce Kaiser's name differently? The theory that I like is when Joshua was burnt and thrown down the canyon, he was reborn, with Malpace Legate no longer. With this, maybe his respect, or change in ideology, caused his pronunciation to change. Nick Nicholas, who has a PhD in historical linguistics, endorsed the historical pronunciation of Kaiser, explained by Bob Cook. Traditional Roman Latin pronounces Caesar as Kaiser, but Latin began to change, with the English language pronunciation of Latin words softening the pronunciation of C from a K to an S, while S's became vocalised more with a Z sound, bringing about modern Roman languages. A third type of Latin, known as Church Latin, is used by Italians, in which C is pronounced as Ch, so Caesar could have been pronounced as Caesar. If Joshua Graham's pronunciation was based upon his religious renewal, I would have thought that Caesar would have been a more appropriate usage. but perhaps it's still symbolising a renewal, or a move forward in Graham's life, or perhaps simply disrespect. That brings us to an end of our Fallout New Vegas Iceberg, with the Mojave Wasteland being forever changed. Has this shifting revealed all of the Wasteland's secrets? Thank you for making it all the way through this iceberg. There are so many Fallout videos that can be found online, so I'm honoured that not only you've watched this video, but you've made it all the way through. What do you think about all the theories that we've talked about in this video? Or are there any points that we've missed? Or even juicy theories that haven't been revealed yet? Let's collect these thoughts in a vault for hopefully more videos to come.